Welcome everybody. Today is the beginning of a new cultural season. We had stopped all lectures during the pandemic and COVID, all that, and went online. So for many years we haven't had any lectures here, except courses, some of them. But now we're starting again with lectures here. And we thought, what topic shall we start with? So we chose actually the soul of all topics at the same time as something to start with here. So I'm going to tell you a bit about Dr. Mervat Nasser and about the topic of Hermetic philosophy, because you might look at it and think Hermetic philosophy, this is a certain era in ancient Egypt that we are discussing. In reality, no. Hermetic philosophy is just a name, but this is the wisdom of the ages. This is the wisdom, it's the thread on which all sciences, all philosophies, all types of psychology, even things like in my domain, architecture and city planning and all that, all those, and even our religions, our secret traditions, our spiritual traditions, and all those, in whatever religion you can think of, you go deeper into them, and they are built on this thread that comes from the ancient humanity up to today, and that's the thread of what we call this, the wisdom behind all sciences, because all what we have today doesn't grow out of nothing. It grows out of a bed of wisdom. So with time, we have forgotten this origin of all things, and we look at things as separated. We look at religions as if they're separate. We don't see that they are built on the same philosophy. We might call it today Hermetic philosophy, but it's the wisdom of the ages. So, unfortunately, what we have today is the people see only the outward things. We look at the surface and we don't see the essence. And that's why the surface has many differences, but the essence is the same. It's just like I remember the Dr. Joseph Campbell in America, who wrote the Jungian philosophy there, and Jungian philosophy is actually
sorry.
Jungian philosophy is actually based on ancient Egypt in many ways. So there's one of the books about Carl Gustav Jung, so the Gnostic Jung. So there's a lot. Jung even is the last, let's say, the last stage of psychology that brings sort of the touches the spiritual and touches all the archetypes in our subconscious. All that comes from ancient Egypt. So we even have in Maadi here, when they discovered the codexes, and Carl Gustav Jung was studying them, he found the one about the archetypes and all that. So they called it, now it is called the Jungian Codex. So yes, so this Jungian philosophy is actually a revival of Hermetic philosophy. Now, what is Hermetic philosophy? If this is a revival, there's nothing called Hermetic philosophy per se, because when we say Hermetic philosophy, we go to ancient Egypt, and if you go to any classical Egyptologist, they will tell you about the history of ancient Egypt. They'll never go into the soul behind that. So the importance of Dr. Mervat's work, now I'll go to her. She is a professional psychiatrist and psychologist. She is well versed in all types of psychology, but not anchored into the Freudian confinement. No, she continued into the Jungian school, and the Jungian school somehow led to the Hermetic philosophy. The thing is, after 30 years of working as a professional psychiatrist and psychologist in the UK, one day she decided to give it all up, come to Egypt, and she is going to revive the Hermetic philosophy. So she went to Minya, in this area where ancient Hermopolis was, and there's not much left of it, and she went to create her own new version based on her means of a new Hermopolis. But what she was creating is not just a project. No, what she wants is to revive the soul of ancient Egypt, the soul of everything, so to make us look inside ourselves. And so, what she is saying now, if the importance of this, if we go back through history, if we go to the Renaissance, for example, in the Renaissance, the discovery of the Hermetic philosophy led to the Renaissance. When they discovered the Hermetic philosophy,
yeah.
it led to the Renaissance. Let's go to the great Islamic civilization. When the Greeks turned against the schools of Plato and Pythagoras and closed the schools and all that, all the philosophers of those ancient philosophies, they went to Syria, to the areas there. And so we had all the philosophers based on Hermetic philosophy. They went there and started all the sort of the inner school that led to the great Islamic civilization. So the Hermetic philosophy is an essence that whenever you touch this essence, you achieve greatness. You don't touch this essence, you stay where you are, just as little like that. So here, Dr. Mervat, when she came here, she did not, in my opinion, receive the proper recognition for the value of what she is bringing out again. Many people here receive recognitions because we give recognition for outer things. But reviving the Hermetic essence of all our knowledge, whether it's Islamic, whether it's Coptic, Christian, or Jewish, or whatever, reviving all that, showing that we all stem from the same inner light flowing from the Hermetic times to here, bringing this to our consciousness today is like achieving a miracle. So trying to do that, I don't feel that she received the support or the recognition, because if she had received the support and recognition, Hermopolis would have been a new light, a new spiritual light in Egypt. It would have transformed all of Egypt, because people would now start looking inside at their spiritual essence. So I won't go so much further here. All I want you to understand that, okay, when we speak about Hermes, when we speak about philosophy, it is not Hermes and it's not philosophy. It is the light inside your soul. My friend Assam, Dr. Assam Azam, sitting there yesterday, we were sitting on the tennis court, and he says in Arabic, Wallahi al-Azim talata.
Yeah. يا مثلث الرحمات. مثلث الرحمات. الله العظيم. Exactly.
God tries to create. So I'm telling him, why do you say that? Okay, we all say that. والله العظيم ثلاثة. It's the Hermetic tradition. It's still alive in us somehow. So, welcome.
Thank you.
Mervat,
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you for being here with us.
And thank you for having me.
Well,
thank you.
It's the beginning of a long journey.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Well, I don't know what to say about this introduction because I hope I will live up to your all expectations. But actually, it sums up what I'm going to talk, as if really he was with me in preparing the lecture. So it is almost talking about exactly what was said. So I'm really privileged and honored to be here, and thankful that you've given me this opportunity, and I hope that it's going to be a long journey, because this place has started something very special, and it is rooted in the Hermetic tradition, or in the Hermetic philosophy, or what we call or refer to as the Hermetic philosophy, but it is the core of ancient Egypt, the wisdom of ancient Egypt, and the soul that it is almost lost or forgotten, and we need to be able to retrieve it and revive it. And that was my big mission. I don't know whether I succeeded, or it is still the beginning of a long journey, although I've been already at it for 15 years, after 30 years in England, working as a psychiatrist. So that gives away my age. So, and I'm going to say that because there is a lovely lady who is with us today. She is the owner and director of Ardi, and Ardi is also kind of spiritual place or a space that has the same message in some ways, even if it is not based or rooted in ancient Egyptian thought or philosophy. Shireen, who is with us, she approached me one day and she said, look, we want to organize a workshop for you in Ardi, and it's not going to be a one-off thing. I'm going to start with you as a new program of honoring the elderly. And I got angry because I told her, well, I'm not elderly. It's one of the things that, unfortunately, I'm yet to come to terms with, is getting old. And it is not because I want to stay young. It is simply because what I want to give is still a lot, and my body isn't in pace or parallel to the what I want to offer. So it is the reduced body capacity and the energy, the reduced energy, that are the limitations of old age that I'm really still unable to come to terms with, because I am actually, at this time, there is a saying by Samuel Beckett, who used to be one of my favorite writers. He says, I hate this old age, but I will not trade it for the loss of the fire inside me. So I am actually, there is so much fire inside me, but I am hitting the old age. But I thank Shireen for that, and we agreed. She had also this innovative idea of following the ancient Egyptian calendar, the farming calendar, and starting with 3 workshops, consecutive workshops, following the 3 seasons of farming. And in a week's time, actually next Saturday, we are going to start. Next Thursday. Well, I don't know, I'm very confused at the moment. So we are going to touch on more or less the same thing, but as a beginning, as ancient Egyptian thought, which in fact the basis of the Hermetic philosophy. So it is ancient Egyptian wisdom, and we call it the plowing of the mind. So you can have with P as plowing the mind, and the blowing of the mind, which is actually talking about something that will get everyone not shocked but blown away with the new ideas. So it is planting new ideas. They are not new ideas, they are old ideas that we need to know about. At the same time, or almost the same time, I had a young lady who is the junior version of the boss, of the man behind this achievement. And she told me, what about giving a lecture on Hermetic philosophy? I mean, they came to me, to New Hermopolis in 2020. In fact, immediately before the corona. And around that time I broke my leg, and the next time I saw them was in my bed, bedridden with my fracture of my leg. So it was a turning in heaven, and everybody knows that 2020 ushered in very bad phase to humanity with all the things associated with the corona. And what is interesting, that now there is a new turn as well in cosmic consciousness with the entrance of Pluto into Aquarius, and so it is a new turning in human consciousness, and we hope that this time is going to be positive thing and full of interesting things to come, because that's going to be with us for the next 20 years. So I feel that there is something indicative that the first time I met Dr. Crime and got to know them in New Hermopolis was a cosmic turn, and this time is another cosmic turn, but I believe, and I am very optimistic, that's going to be an upturn for humanity. I hope so. So without so much introduction, I'm going to get into the subject. So this is the blowing of the mind. This is it's November the 28th to the 30th, and anyone who wants to register, I think is still room for registering, especially that we are having an online as well, a digital registration for people who want. And as I said, it will be different because this is an introductory lecture. Yes, it's more or less the same subject, but there are ramifications that are different. So that is anyone who is interested in what I'm going to talk about today and wants to follow it on, I think you can go to Ardi. I'm going to follow that on as well, subject to the approval of the boss, that I'm going to follow it on as well in a different way. So each program is the same and different, but both are complementary to each other. And this is actually the notice that Dorea sent me about today's lecture. And this is the guy behind the whole thing. This is Thoth, or Hermes. And he says, I have inscribed the secrets of this knowledge in sacred symbols on stone tablets, which I have concealed for a future world that may seek again our sacred wisdom. So they knew that the wisdom of Egypt would be lost. They put it in symbols and they engraved it on stones until heavens births new people that are worthy of such knowledge and such wisdom. And we hope that someday soon there will be enough people to revive this wisdom. At the beginning of time, with the creation mythology in ancient Egypt, that is the beginning of ancient Egyptian thought. You cannot in any way start talking on ancient Egyptian thought without going to ancient Egyptian mythology. So Ra is the primordial god, and he's the sun god. And Thoth is the god of culture. So the combination between Ra and Thoth is the combination of light, or looking at light as an enlightenment. So the first culture or civilization on earth to link light with enlightenment was Egypt. Because Ra, for instance, the first capital of Egypt was On, or Heliopolis, and it was known for the obelisk. The obelisk is a concrete symbol of light. It is actually, in the Egyptian language, it is the entrapment of the light in a symbol, in an architectural symbol. But you can look at that and see why every single city on earth fought or battled to get an obelisk from Egypt. I mean, already Rome has 5 obelisks, but every single city, we have Paris, we have obviously the embankment in London, and we have in New York, and and even the ones that couldn't get one, they actually fabricated one and made a false one, because it became a symbol of a powerful city. And a powerful city is about catching the light and making something with this light. That's why we have Thoth in ancient Egyptian culture. He's almost the rival of Ra. But in Egypt, there is no rivalry. In Egypt, there is complementarity. That is, or powers or forces, they complement each other. So Thoth sign is the moon, and Ra is the sun. So he deputizes for the sun when the sun goes. So there will be light even at night. The moon is very complicated, and the mythology of the moon is very complicated because it sums up humanity. It begins and it matures into a full moon, and then it dies. So it is life and death, and it is this recurrent cycle. And despite that, being the moon god, he actually, when he created the Egyptian calendar that we talked about, he didn't follow the lunar months. He followed the solar months and the solar calendar. So they were really aware of every single thing, the meaning of every single thing. He was aware of the moon, but also aware of the sun as the full power of this civilization. But for this power to continue and to be important, you actually have to have culture. So he is the one who introduced culture into this powerful light. The light is light. You can have very powerful guys on earth, but they are not cultured. And it's funny, actually, because there is an important story in in Hellenistic times and in so-called Hermetic times, of Hermes, who is the equivalent of Thoth, is stealing the goats from Apollo. And Apollo is the sun god as well in the Greek civilization. So it couldn't have been a coincidence that Hermes stole the goats from Apollo, only to go back to him and say, I will return the goats to you, but you have to play the what they call it, it's not like the harp, but it's a special instrument that it is unique to Apollo. So it's playing music. So you can actually, it will come to my mind in a second. So he had to teach Apollo that's not enough to be the sun deity. You don't have to be to shine all the time. You have to learn culture. You have to be a cultured human being, and that is by music. and because it's no good to be a shepherd only. And in fact, this is what happened. He became, of course, after that, not the god of light and sun and all of that. He was the god of poets and the god of culture. Apollo became very important. That began, and even the laureates for the poets and the writers, it comes from the Greek times. So you can see how the connection between light and enlightenment that began in Egypt continued in Greek times by Hermes, who is the equivalent of Thoth. What is this ancient Egyptian culture? As I said, the most important component of it is mythology. And mythology is so important, and we'll come to that, because even the revival now of this Hermetic philosophy or tradition is based on mythology, and is based on the idea that new psychology cannot be understood. Human beings and human souls cannot be fully understood without the Jungian archetypes and the understanding of the collective consciousness, and you cannot find yourself except by acknowledging what is hidden inside you that comes from before. There is the dead live in us, so that is something. And then, of course, there are the books of the afterlife, and we know about the pyramid texts. We know about the Book of the Dead that is coming forth by the day. We know about other books like the Book of Two Ways and the Book of Coffins, and there's so many. And each one of them, they are also complementing each other, but they all speak the same thing: to achieve resurrection, to achieve renewal, to achieve regeneration, you have to follow certain rules. You have to be cultured human being. And that also was reflected in ancient Egyptian literature. We hardly know anything about the ancient Egyptian literature, which are really unique. I mean, like the piece of the dialogue between man and his soul is the first existential piece of literature in the human history, and is so beautifully written. A man contested his existence and is trying to fight his soul and wants to die, only to reconcile with his own limitations and to find a way out of this torture. And it's only through the conflict with yourself and the torture that you go through that you can emerge a new human being. So these are the sources. And as I mentioned, that Thoth became Hermes. This is actually a picture of the man who translated the first Hermetic book, or so-called the Hermetica, and that ushered in the Italian Renaissance. And as was mentioned, without this knowledge, we wouldn't have had the Italian Renaissance. So he says, his name is Marcello Ficino, and he says among the Egyptians, the first month of the year is named after him, which is the month of Tut, or Tohot. So he says, he acknowledges, and a city was founded by him that is now called Hermopolis in Greek. He is called the Trismegistus, والله العظيم ثلاثة. Okay, he's called the Trismegistus because he was the greatest philosopher. Okay, so that sums up the man and his legacy. So this is how Thoth progressed in history, from Thoth the Egyptian to Hermes. And you can see, and we are going to mention what he is holding, the caduceus. And the caduceus is a very important symbol because it is again indication of the Egyptian consciousness, the Egyptian kind of rationality, that people now call it Hellenistic rationality. It is about integration. It's about integration of the opposing forces to get a third. People talk about Hegel and the dialectic and all of that. The first dialectic were the Egyptians, and we will come to that because you cannot kill evil. You cannot get away from ugliness. They exist and will continue to exist. It is how to reconcile, how to integrate the bad into yourself, and how to create a new self that is reconciled and integrated and increases the goodness as a buffer for the ugliness or the evil. And then in medieval times, it was the Arabs, and you can see Hermes in this picture. It is on the floor of the Siena Cathedral. And of course, Florence was the site of, and Siena is only 20 kilometers or something from Florence, was the scene of the Renaissance, and all the Renaissance figures were in such area. So when you find that Hermes is teaching people, and he is in Arab uniform or garment, because at that time the Arabs, the early scholars who came into Egypt and were fascinated by this wisdom, and also we have to consider that they had a role to play in Hermopolis, which is Akhmim, and with the alchemy, and they were the first to translate the emerald tablet. So that was before the Renaissance. But everybody talks about the Hermetica, but the emerald tablet is another source of the Hermetic philosophy, and the important one. The Arabs translated it into Arabic in the 8th century. And this was very important because Ficino translated the Hermetica around the 15th century. So it is 7 centuries before there were the words of Hermes, or the words of thought and his wisdom, actually engraved on the emerald tablet. Where is this city of Hermes? It is in Minya, and it is, you have El Abarna, Akhenaten city, that they call him the one behind monotheism, etc., and everything. And of course, it couldn't have been a coincidence. We were taught in a school, although we haven't been taught about ancient Egypt at all in schools. But anyway, they could tell you that he found a piece of land that looks like a sun disk. And then, of course, you can actually, with your creative imagination, you can actually think of any piece of land as sun. But he must have been attracted to this area for a number of reasons, because ancient Hermopolis was there before him, long before him. Because it is the seat of creation. It is prehistoric. It is the beginning of times. And it was found that his father, Amenhotep III, actually was attracted to this area. And I'm sure he was the one who told him to come to this area because it was unique. Area, and he was a very wise man, and he was the one behind Atenism, actually, not Akhenaten, but Akhenaten. That's one of the problems. And actually, Freud, when he talked about the Oedipus complex, he used Akhenaten and his very close connection to his mother, T. He was a poor guy because he had a very strong father and a very strong mother. But he was very, tied in with his mother. And he had real problems after she died, and she had real problems with Nefertiti, and there is so much in that. So psychologically, Akhenaten is an important subject. It's very much like people give him a lot of attention, and it is the literary and the imaginative interpretation of Akhenaten that made Akhenaten. Very much like the discovery by Howard Carter of Tutankhamun, because he is insignificant. character in Egyptian history, but it is, yes, he came into Egyptian history in a crucial time, but he as a king or as a person, as a character, is really insignificant. So there are certain people that history made them very important in Egyptian history simply because of the timing that they came into the scene. And you will be surprised that Hermopolis was actually, it lies in the county of the rabbit, or the county of Win. Ta-Win. Ta means city, so city of Win, and Win is the rabbit. And still till now we talk about the rabbit as a kind of maybe winnish. Yeah, is restless, is keeps moving, and also is connected. The rabbit or hare is connected to the moon. But more important than the symbolism of the rabbit is the fact that in hieroglyphs, rabbit means being, is the soul. So this is the city of the soul. So again, all of these things, when I did what I did, was reviving ancient Hermopolis, because New Hermopolis is next door to the ancient one. It's within walking distance, in fact, and it wasn't easy because it took me 3 years to find the land, let alone all the problems that followed. But anyway, you can see the rabbit here, which is because it became, Ta-Win became Tuna al-Gabal. So a New Hermopolis is in Tuna al-Gabal. Yeah? Yeah. So it's, you can find the rabbit here surrounded by what we call the Ouroboros. The Ouroboros is the snake that eats its tail. So it is the continuation of it is the meaning of regeneration and continuation and rebirth and everything. And it was one of the symbols that Jung used it a lot. So that is actually in the Book of the Dead, the Book of Coming Forth by Day. And as before the Hermetic resources, it says to dwell in Winnet means to live renewed, revitalized, and to be forever reborn. So it's amazing. It's really amazing. I mean, I only came across this very recently, and I was flabbergasted. I was actually shocked. So taught in the creation mythology of Egypt is that, as we said, the Ra-Tot combination is sun, moon, light as an enlightenment. He's also the seat of moon, and the seat of moon is memory. And memory in Greek is mnemosis, which is actually the mother of the muses. Of course, if you go to Alexandria, the area where the library was and everything, was the seat of the 9 muses, the ones that inspire you. So it is a city of inspiration, that it inspires you. Because thought inspires you is the seat of, and also when we come to the new Platonic tradition, which came after that, it actually, they see education as reminiscence, as remembering things. So all education is remembering what was lost and is hidden inside. So that's why thought is called he who relates what was forgotten. And in fact, I hope that next year we're going to have in New Hermopolis a big storytelling festival to honor the Lord of remembering and the seat of memory, and who relates to us what was forgotten. But also he is the Lord of letters, with goddess Sishet, who made documentation, because without the Egyptians, it's not only writing, they documented everything. And that's why we have a great civilization, because it is based on documentation. So it's creation by the word. And he is also the Lord of balance, because with might, he introduces order into the chaos of humanity, or the chaos of the beginning, to order the chaos of the beginning. But the two big mythologies that actually contains all these things that I've been saying is the Heliopolitan myth and the Hermopolis myth. These are the two major ones. All these things like creation by the word, creation by balance, they are really like subsidiaries of the two major myths. So in the Heliopolitan myth, he's the eye restorer. He restores Horus' eye. We'll talk about that in a minute. And in the Hermopolitan, he is the one who reconciles the opposing primordial forces. So integration and integrity is created. So we can see here, it says, but what is time? Someone asks Hermes. Hermes says, time is counting and recounting. We use counting, which is the calculation of time that you calculate. But also counting is giving an account. And recounting is giving a story, a tale. And and it is also giving a story about the past that you must be accountable to. So it is not only reviving the past for the sake of reviving it, it is reviving the past and you become accountable to your account. Okay? So that is the first thing we know that Hermes, or obviously Thoth, was the one who created the language. And it says here, I am Thoth, master of the divine words, because that's actually hieroglyphs means divine words, sacred words. I know what is concealed in the sky, inaccessible on earth, and hidden in the primeval ocean. Because again, the creation in Egypt at the very beginning is either water as chaos. Water has no limits, has no, it's the most powerful thing in life is water. It's not anything else. Water can destroy stone. Water can actually destroy fire. Water is limitless power, and you can drown in it. So it has the ability to make you or drown you in it. So that is the beauty of it, and it is only by creating the word you actually make a definition to this chaos. And we have, with the words and with Thoth, the creator of the words, we have Sishat. Sishat is a very interesting woman and very interesting deity. But of course, because of the time, I'm not going to go into depth in that. But you see in the Karnak here, both Thoth and Sishat, and he says yesterday comes back to us in writing, and that is the power of documentation. She is the creator of libraries. She is the protector or protectoress of the written word. So you can see how all these things, extremely civilized notions, stemmed from mythology. So we have also that, the one who changes chaos, which is the water, the chaotic water, into order. You can see Nun. Nun, again, in ancient Egypt, is the first pool of water. It's not pool because it's not bounded. It's only by bounding it that it becomes a pool of creation. And you can see, of course, the color of the water. Nun is not represented a lot because he's a primordial creator. He's one of the early creators. And you can see the symbol on his head, which is the feather. The feather of Maat is the one that creates order out of chaos. And of course, from water as well, and from the chaotic waters comes the lotus, which is another creation myth, that the water is stemmed from the chaotic water, because it comes, the lotus, you see Tutankhamun coming out from the lotus pond. The lotus actually is a very interesting flower. That's why it was given such importance and significance in ancient Egypt. It opens with sunlight, with sunshine, and it closes on itself by sunset, and it goes deep into the water. It grows in water, but the water has to be still, and the water has to be muddy. So there is mud underneath, and when you come to New Hermopolis, you will see our blue lotus pond, and we pride ourselves on being the generator of the blue lotus. Unfortunately, it is small, and it's not enough for the people who want the flower from us. So it is a sign of something that from stillness comes movement, because it comes out, it actually sinks into the water. And when you see the pool where the lotus is, after sunset at night, there isn't a single thing on its surface. So it is hidden in the heart of the water. And then it emerges from this stillness and from this darkness, and from the, so it symbolizes life. It symbolizes all the things that from inertia, from non-movement comes movement, from darkness comes light, from ugliness, which is mud and all that, comes beauty. So there is so much, and that's why it is so important. It is the rebirthing of the self, so which comes on every day, and it is a dynamic of creation and becoming, of being and becoming. And you can see that in the again, this is the sign of Noon, the creator, the water, and how the scarab, which will bring us to the Heliopolitan tradition, the Heliopolis, with the scarab and the scarab coming out. The scarab actually is very important because it means becoming. So being and becoming is essential in ancient Egypt. You are continuously becoming. So, and you only go down when you die, only to become later on. But you are in a continuous journey of becoming. So that brings us to the Heliopolitan creation myth, which actually starts with Atum or Ra. Atum is the silent dormant form, and then gives birth to Shu and Tifnut, which is the water or the dew and the air, and then gives rise to Nut and Geb. And we find Nut is the heaven, sky, is the sky, yeah, and God, and the god of earth is Geb, and Geb is man. So it's you can say, yeah. Well, what does that mean? Yeah. Anyway, you can see how. Of course, it's a long story, because to talk about the mythology, the Heliopolitan myth, and its ramifications and its importance and significance is a big story. But in the end, Ra, in his anger, he separates them from each other because Geb and Nut, the sky and earth, they loved each other, and they wanted to be together. But Ra, because he wasn't, I mean, like all the major hierarchical deities, got angry that they didn't seek permission from him and had them separated. And but before that, Thoth came into the equation, who is the moon, and they stole time from the sun, because we have the solar year, the solar calendar is 365, and we have the lunar calendar is less. That's why we have the 28 days of the month and all that. So it's very complicated, but very interesting. And then in the 4 days that were left between the solar and the lunar calendar, the first family in history were created, and that's Osiris and Isis and the Set and Nephthys. So that's how creation happened. And then we have this story of Horus, who actually was the result of the marriage between Osiris and Isis, and Set, when he revenged the death of his father. And of course we can't go into the myth because it's a very long myth and has lots of ramifications. And we can see here that both represent the two sides of the self, because you cannot actually have one without the other. After all, Set is the brother of Osiris. So, but he is the one who conspired against him and had him killed and all that. But then Isis managed to have a relationship with him after his death, which is very much like his soul or his spirit, very much like the Virgin Mary. And then the Savior was born, out of this immaculate conception. It is an immaculate conception. All of that is there. All of that in the myth. But then he became, most of the people regard Horus as the triumphant. But you cannot triumph, because after all, evil and good, or goodness, are two sides of the same coin. They are two brothers. It is Horus and Set and Osiris are the two sides of things. Osiris became also a metaphor for agriculture and cultivation, and Set became the symbol of desert. And Egypt is what? It's mainly desert. So it is. There is so much in the cosmic tradition in the Egyptian thought. You can't do without the other. And cultivation, it changes. There are seasons, different seasons in the year. So, but the desert is eternal. And that's why lots of, you can't, it's unchanged. The desert is unchanged. But the farming land is a changeable thing. So all of there are so many metaphorical ramifications from this notion, from this early one. So when he was born like Jesus, very much like Christ, out of Immaculate Conception, Horus. And he went to fight his uncle Set. But who should win? After all, they are two sides of the same coin. They are brothers. They are all needed. It is an eternal conflict. It's an eternal dialectic. So in the end, they have to reconcile. They have to find a way of reconciling. And that is how we know during the fight that Horus loses his eye. And cannot continue with his fight except by calling on Thoth, or Hermes later on Thoth, to actually give him back, to heal his eye or give him back another eye, which happened. If any one of you went to Edfu, it is the story of the fight between Horus and Set. But you cannot kill that. And lots of people say Horus triumphed. Horus cannot triumph, because this is another force in life. And it has to exist. You can only reconcile. You can only integrate the evil into you and recreate something out of it. It is a dialectic. So that's why the ancient Egyptian philosophy, philosophical thought, actually is very complicated. There is no right and wrong. There is no good and evil. They have to come together somehow, or to continue the dialectic. Is a dialectical motion, and that's why Hegel was very, very much into this. And the creation of the dialectic comes from ancient Egypt. So the eye, he restored his eye. He gave him another eye, an all-seeing eye, which is the inner eye. So the outer seeing eye cannot see all the reality. You have to have an inner eye. And so this is the eye giver. He gave him a new eye, and sight became insight. And the two together had to reconcile. You can see this is as an important symbol. It's called Simatawi. Most people who do yoga and things, they use this without actually realizing the importance of this, because this Egypt is about integration, it's about moderation, it's about balance. You cannot exclude one. There is no triumphant, and that's why lots of people call Horus the triumphant. It's no triumph. That is a mono-sided way of looking at things. And then the whole story finished. And that's the reason why with civilization, people have this unitary, very myopic way of looking at things. You can't get rid of evil, because evil is inside every one of us. So we contain these contrary forces. So that's so it is the reconciliation, and you have that, and that's actually, it was transmitted into say Abu Zayd al-Hilali, I mean, because many of these stories actually go back, they were oral tradition, and it was kept in the hearts and the minds of the rural people and continued. In the end, you don't have a triumphant one. You have to integrate the two and to keep things going, and that's how you breathe. The Simatawi, that they are tying the two sides of thought, of the Nile, here as a Nile, and we find this a lot in the Nile, and that's why when I was introduced first to ancient Egypt, because wherever you go, you say Upper Egypt, Lower Egypt, Upper Egypt, Lower. These dichotomies actually live in our own mind. They didn't exist in ancient Egypt. We dichotomize things. We are the one and the opposite. But Egypt is about reconciliation. It's about integration. And you can see that we cannot breathe, the simple here. They are sitting on, their foot are on the trachea, which is the breathing area. So Egypt cannot breathe, or the universe cannot breathe, except by reconciliation and the integration of the opposing or the force. So it's he who makes harmony out of discord. And in fact, these exact words were used by Einstein after that. It's one of the quotes that was used by Einstein. He was very much into ancient Egypt. So the philosophical perspectives, and I wrote a book on it, and although it was written in Arabic 20 years ago, I'm now regretting that, because at that time I was so idealistic and wanting to put everything in writing in Egyptian or in Arabic as a way of spreading the message and teaching. And I did 40 books for the children as well in 1997. Only to discover later on that the ones who read are not the Arabic speaking, and no one recognizes this effort, unfortunately. Some, of course, but not the way you wanted it to change culture and to help people to think and get ahead with life and understand life. So this the philosophical perspectives, I have this book, لماذا فقد حورس عينه, because and everyone was laughing at me, what is this kind of title? Why did Horus lose his eye? And new reading in ancient Egyptian thought. And it teaches us the binaries and how you integrate them, good and evil. There is no absolute goodness and there is no absolute evil. There is no loss without gain. And there is no gain without loss, and there is no life without death, and there is no, and sight is limited, you have to grow insight. But this is the first myth, which is a cornerstone, the Heliopolitan one. The other one is the Hermopolis myth, which is called the Ogdoad. The first one is called the Ennead, which is number 9. And if you look at the beginning of them and count them, you will find them 9 in the end, because of all the individuals in the myth. The Hermopolitan myth, or the Ogdoad, is actually is very much the Greeks after that reduced it to the 4 natural forces, or the 4 forces of nature, which is earth, air, light, fire, and air. If I ask anyone, is water feminine or masculine? Feminine. It depends on your language. For some people, it is feminine. For others, it is masculine. But the Egyptians had 2 gendered entities in everything. So they had feminine water and masculine water, and they had feminine fire and masculine fire, and so on and so forth. So the 4 became 8. And also the ancient Egyptian, because I'm not bragging about it, but it was far more sophisticated than the Greek. Most people attribute all philosophical dimensions to the Greek, but the Egyptians were really, really deep and profound into looking into things. So, for instance, noon, or water, was taken as water, as an element, a primordial element. But the Egyptians saw water as limited and unlimited. We talked about the first ocean, the creation of unbound water, and you had to bind it. So boundaries are needed to understand, to get everything. You have hidden and apparent. You have visible or invisible, all these things. So the Egyptians gave attributes to these 4 natural forces. And that's why, and of course, the most important, that everything is feminine and masculine. So there is no exclusion of gender. So everything is both gendered. So this is called the 8 forces that created life. And it's called the Ogdoad. So the Ogdoad is the mythology of Hermopolis, which is Ashmonin, because Ashmonin is Shimnu and Khimnu. Shimnu and Khimnu in ancient Egyptian and in Coptic means the city of 8. So the Ogdoad is the city of 8, which is about harmony, about the integration of the forces, because without it you don't have a holistic person, a full person. So it is the creation of harmony or equilibrium out of the marriage of opposites. We live, and the new rationality, which is the Greek rationality, that is very, very different, is all or nothing, either or. The Egyptians were capable of integrating things. That's why you have lots of things that doesn't make immediate sense in the Egyptian way of thinking, but they are all about integration. It's all about that you don't ignore reality. You don't ignore what is going on. Everything has its own opposite. Horus could not live without Set, and Set could not live without Horus. And that is actually, this is the marriage of opposing forces to create balance, harmony, and complementarity. So they become complementary to each other and needed for each other and needed to correct each other, because you don't have absolute right. There isn't nothing in ancient Egypt called absolute right. That's it. The triumph of Horus. There isn't anything like that. Even Thoth himself, or Hermes, after that was limited, and you find lots of descriptions about the limitations of Thoth himself and or Hermes. And the necessity of adopting an integrated approach to life. So life has to be integrated, and that is balance. And we talk now about integrated philosophy and integrated consciousness and integrated psychology and everything. So it's the beginning of all that. And you find in this picture, which is really, although it looks very complicated, it looks that it is a combination of the Ogdoad and the Ennead. Above, you have the symbol of Osiris, because he is the vertebral column, he is the trunk of the trees, he is all that. And besides, and beneath it is the Ogdoad, or the four and four, which is the Ogdoad. So it is the two complementing each other. When people talk about mythology, people talk about mythology as if it is unrelated to life. Mythology is how you make sense of your own world. So it is not something that's, it is man's creation of meaning through stories. So that's you make sense. You try to make sense out of life phenomena. So and that's the beauty of mythology. And that's why, I mean, you know, of course, about the Heliopolitan myth, how Osiris was killed and all of that, as I said, and the fight between Horus and Set, and how they have to integrate in the end and everything. But then you can have how the two mythologies complement each other. Because you have that's called the passion of Osiris, which is the passion of Christ. Actually, that's the whole story. That it continued with the passion of Christ, because Osiris died and became the god of the underworld, very much like Christ. He was elevated to heaven, but in the end, it's actually he's alive in all of us. But he's alive as that you have to bring. You have to remember him. He was cut into pieces and spread all over Egypt, but it is through memory. You remember, you put the pieces together. And that's how you have Isis and Osiris, Nephthys. Nephthys is usually the shadow of Isis. So, and you have Osiris in between them. They say, come, let us lift him up, lift up his head. Come, let us rejoin his bones. Come, let us reassemble his limbs. Come, let us put an end to all his woes. And this is exactly what I would like to say about Egypt, the fragmentation, the lack of integrity, the lack of integration, the lack of a collective meaning and collective consciousness. This is the passion of Osiris, and it should be the passion of Egypt, that Egypt laments itself and tries to put its pieces together to remember itself. Remembering as not forgetting it, but remembering as putting the pieces together. And then we go from mythology to manuscripts. And despite the fact that Hermopolis, or the territory of thought, is mythical in many ways, and thought himself is mythical in many ways, but he's also a kind of a real person as well. And this is the beauty about ancient Egypt, that you have no boundaries between imagination and facts, and how the imaginative framework feeds into the kind of rational. And that's why the rationality is different from the Greek rationality. So that's it is a different kind of rationality, which is about reconciliation, is about recombining things, recombining imagination. It's imaginative way of thinking, which we all need. Otherwise, we will have the reductionist way of thinking that dominates life. And we are dominated by this reductionist thinking till now, or reductionist rationality. So we have now, apart from the mythology, which is the important source, we have books. We have the Book of Thought, which is important, and it was found in fragments. We have the Hermetica that was translated by the Italians in the Renaissance, by Marcello Ficino. And we have the Emerald Tablet that was actually the Arabs who translated it. The early Arab scholars, okay? And then we have the Nag Hammadi documents library, which is actually the Gnosticism that is contained, which is a ramification from all the other documents. You have the map of Egypt, and it is the geohermetic map of Egypt, contains lots of things. It's almost the whole of Egypt is geohermetic map. Each part you have Hermopolis, and then you have Lycopolis, which is Asyut, and came from Asyut Plotinus, who is the father of Neoplatonism. And then you have Akhmim, which is Panopolis, which and Pan is the son of Hermes. So it's all connected, besides the fact that it is the seat of alchemy. So it is again the alchemical self and all that. So, and then after that we have Nag Hammadi, and Nag Hammadi is the library. So, and then culminating into the physical monuments that everyone sees now, which is Luxor, and but the reality of it, the making of Egypt is throughout Egypt. And it is abstract, it is cognitive, it is something. Egypt is about abstract thinking. It's not about physical things, or the physical is a manifestation of the abstract. So, after the Book of Thought, we have the Book of Thought is the first. This is only an explanation, but I'm going to go through it quickly. It's about gnosis, or self-knowledge, because it is usually between two. This is the dialectic, the Hegelian dialectic, that usually to have all these documents. It is connection between, or a dialogue. It is dialogical, which is very much dialectical. So you find the truth by yourself. No one dictates you. It's not didactic. It is, you have to actually abstract and get the notion out of the knowledge that is presented to you. So it is someone who loves knowledge and someone who imparts knowledge, or who praises knowledge. So you are between a knowledgeable, because he's someone who loves knowledge, and another one who seeks knowledge, and it is a dialogue. So everything in Egypt is dialogical, and the dialogical means that it is not all or nothing. It's not either or, which unfortunately with the logical or the setting of our current logic, it's either or. It is right or wrong. Egypt was so different and the mindset was so different. The Emerald Tablet was about transformation, that you are constantly becoming. It's about being and becoming, about the scarab, about this constant journey, that until you die, you are in a state of becoming. So it is self-alchemy. And you have, by the Florentine time, that there was a guy, because of course by the time the first fundamentalism, which was the Christian fundamentalism, happened in Egypt, again it is when religion marries power, so they had to exclude anything that is different. And so many manuscripts went to Italy, or to Florence in particular, because it wasn't united by then, and they wanted to be, the Italians or the Romans wanted to imitate the Greek, that they are knowledgeable. They are not just a military might or power. So they wanted to translate things, and they created a Platonic academy, and the Medici, who was actually behind all the Renaissance things, which is actually very nice. I wish we have Medicis, businessmen who adopts culture and do these things. Without them, we wouldn't have had anything. We wouldn't have had Michelangelo or Da Vinci or any of these people, because they looked after them. And so at that time, the Medici wanted to create a Platonic academy in imitation with the Greek, and Ficino was conversant in Latin as well as in Greek, and he came across this pauper who came from Egypt with some manuscripts, and got these manuscripts from him, and then went to the Medici and told him, I came across manuscripts that are much older than Plato. So he asked him to translate the manuscripts. And that is the result of the Corpus Hermeticum. But it is part of the Hermetic Hermetic knowledge. The Hermetic knowledge is not only the corpus. It's we have the Emerald Tablet, and we have the Book of Thought, and we have the Nag Hammadi documents, all of this. And we have the mythology, and we have everything. So they are not only at that time. It goes back to ancient Egypt, at the beginning of understanding what life is about. So the sum of the ancient Egyptian mind. So the Corpus Hermeticum is about healing, is about this integration of the opposites, is about, or opposing forces, is reconciliation, is everything has its own opposites, but you need to incorporate the opposite. The healing power of philosophy, that's and then we have the Nag Hammadi documents, which are actually about gnosis, and that was transmitted from the Jewish gnosis to the Christian gnosis, and then the Muslim or the Islamic gnosis. That is actually
it's
how
5:30.
He wants me to finish. So the gnosis, the idea of knowing, that is the spiritual knowing, actually started from the Hermetic tradition, and we have the Gnostic Judaism, which is the Kabbalah, and then we have the Gnostic Christianity, which is called Gnosticism, and then we have the Gnostic Islam, which is the Sufi tradition. Out of the, of these things, I don't subscribe very much to the 7 Hermetic principles, because just people limit, they are all there, but they limit it. They don't see it as metaphorical, as a way of thinking. They see it as a rigid principles that it's everything is in the mind. There is correspondence. That's as above, so below, as inside, so outside. There is a polarity. There is positive and negative. There is gender. There is always female and male. There is a rhythm, which of course that takes us to the things like the rhythm and the vibration are very much the way that biogeometry is about, yes. And there is a cause and effect and how you combine all these things. So out of this, we have the hermetic self, which we are minds. I am mind. So man is a mind. That's the difference between us and animals, that we have minds. And as above, so below. So you actually, what you have on land, on earth, has to be a reflection of what you imagine heaven is. So you have to create heaven on earth. So as above, so below. But you are the gardener. You are the messenger from the gods to create heaven on earth. This is your responsibility. And that's the beauty of it. That there is something, because we are the products, humans are the products of the marriage between Nut and Geb, heaven and earth. So we left heaven above, but she is our mother. And we became very earthly. We became very tied to earth. Being tied to earth doesn't leave room for imagination. And without imagination, you don't have humanity. Then, after Egypt, for a period, until the new religions, the ones that we are familiar with, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, for a period of time, what they call it the late pagan mind, people actually subscribe to all these ideas that come from ancient Egypt, but they call it Hermetic after that, because just it was a word, the Hermetic tradition combining all this philosophical. It represents the mind of Egypt. It is the mind of Egypt. So, but of course, the favor went to the mind of Greece, and the Greek mentality became the dominant thing, which again it was excluding the middle in Greek rationality, but the Egyptians never excluded. It was integration. It was reconciliation, which is great difference, and that's what we are looking at now as a way of thinking. Okay, and that continued. We have lots of things. Is it religion? Or is it philosophy? Because, of course, Egypt never actually dictated things. That's the beauty about ancient. I call it philosophy, because even in the dialogues, in the Book of Thought or in the Hermetica or anything, you find the pupil who is seeking the wisdom. You find the wisdom seeker, and it is dialectical. It is, you have to find the truth by yourself. So it is not, you have to do this, otherwise you go to hell. That's the difference between religion as we know it and ancient Egyptian thought. And even it's different from Greek way of thinking, because the Greek way of thinking has an excluded middle. His rationality is not reconciled rationality. So, but it started with Platonism. There is something called Middle Platonism, which is, in Platonic, there is one of his books which, of course, talks about ancient Egypt in a big way. He stayed in Egypt, and most of his work was in Egypt. So, but unfortunately, Egypt was ignored after that. And then Pythagoras, and we have, of course, that's that's again is different. It's all about the power of music and harmony and all this, and the unseen, the invisible, the felt, all. And then we have the Neoplatonism, and we talked about Plotinus, who was from Asyut and then went to Alexandria. And Neoplatonism is all about creating things by remembering what it was. Yeah, so that's it is this remembrance, and that's why the memory of the earlier thinkers and the earlier thought is very important. And then we have Gnostic Christianity or Gnosticism in general, including the Kabbalah or the Hermetic Kabbalah and the Gnostic Christianity. And then we have the Manichaeism or Manichaeism, who is a philosopher who is supposed to have been a pupil of Hermes. So we have all of that. These are the things. You have all these Hermetic derivatives and variants. You have the Neoplatonic philosophy. You have Pythagoras. You have Hermes and Plato. You have, it's the other way around, that it starts with Plato and then Pythagoreanism and then Neoplatonic philosophy and then the Hermetic Kabbalah. And then, of course, you have the Christian or Kabbalah or the Gnosticism, and you can see that Isis is on the throne in the middle, and you have Moses and Hermes on her sides. So that's again Italian Renaissance. So Isis is the goddess of wisdom, and it continued in the Mediterranean for a long time. And then we have the other guy that's the Manichaeist. So after that, all this bulk of wisdom and philosophies left Alexandria and all what happened after that and everything, and went to the rest of the world. Because of course we have in Alexandria with Hypatia, who is the last of the Neoplatonists, the savage murdering of Hypatia, or Hypatia as others pronounce her. Egyptian wisdom had to travel somewhere to find. Some went to the east because because Islam was still at the very beginning, and others went to Florence or Italy. But of course that was after going to east with the new emerging Islam, which was early on a very civilized way of thinking and took from the ancients their wisdom. So we have it went to the Arab Muslim scholarship, and I always use scholarship because that's different from Arab or Muslim civilization, because it wasn't a civilization except by the scholarship. And the scholarship was early scholarship that was heavily influenced by the ancient Egyptian philosophy, as we mentioned, the dialogues and all of that. They were all actually translated, especially the seat of Muslim wisdom was in Akhmim or Panopolis. So Panopolis was so important in the early Islamic tradition. And Zunnun comes from that part of Egypt. So the wisdom, it all through that. And the idea of Gnosticism, of knowing and abstract thinking, actually came in that part of Egypt. So the Arab Muslim Hermeticism, which was actually around the 8th century, so that's before the Renaissance Hermeticism, that was about the 14th, 15th century, so 7 centuries after that. And then it was the English, because the English were really, they actually made a split, a conscious split, of course, at the time of Henry VIII, with the Church of Rome, and created their own Christianity. And that was the beginning of the reform of the Church of England. And of course, it carried on with the daughter of Henry VIII, who is Elizabeth I, who had Dr. Dee, who was an amazing guy, very conversant with ancient languages, and had a library that rivaled Oxford at that time, Oxford Library, and he's still celebrated in many generations, although at that time people called him mad. And he had all the things, I mean, all the Alexandrian manuscripts. He had, of course, also the Hermetica. He had lots of things there, and so the British were really the first to acknowledge the Hermetic tradition as a way of reform of Christianity or the Christian Church. And that generated utopianism because it was but Egyptian philosophy or the Hermetic tradition is about reconciled thinking, is about what I call it a possible utopia, because after that, unfortunately, the utopian image or the utopian way of thinking was either or, not reconciliatory. That's why everyone is revisiting Hermeticism now and the Hermetic tradition, because it's about reconciliation, it's about reintegration, it's about Gnostic tradition. You know from Gnostic books, from the books. So it's about gaining insight from that ancient tradition helps you to gain insight. So there was the Elizabethan utopianism, and we know about Thomas More. He was the first one who produced the book, The Utopia. And then the American idealism, that actually we have the New Atlantis. And in fact, I learned last summer from someone who is a successor of Francis Bacon, that Francis Bacon is a illegitimate son of Elizabeth I. So yeah, and she didn't want to acknowledge him, but he was behind a lot of reform based on the Hermetic tradition, and he took it to America because he had to escape the persecution by the ones who didn't want to acknowledge his presence, because she was supposed to be celibate. She never really married Elizabeth I. So they couldn't acknowledge his presence, and but he is a very important guy, and he talked about the New Atlantis, which is the new Hermopolis. Actually, it is acknowledging the Hermetic tradition, and how the Americans became American, the basis of American idealism. And if anyone looks at the American dollar, they will find lots of things, because of course there are Masonic symbols, and I will come to that, because there is so fraternities and societies that stem from that. That doesn't give Hermeticism or Hermetic philosophy a bad name, even if the Masons or the Freemasons, some of them went to excesses and they became powerful, and lots of them. But it is the notion behind it is the same. The philosophy behind it is about revisiting ancient Egypt and ancient Egypt wisdom. So after that, there was the German Romantic Hermeticism, starting with Goethe and all the ones and all the Romantic poets, etc. And then in the end, there was, as I mentioned, the Hermetic societies and fraternities, and even in modern times, I think you know about Umberto Eco, who was actually one of the trustees of the Alexandrian Library in its revival at the time when, before it actually went downhill, but it was at that time he called Hermeticism or Hermetic way of life as the integrated third, that you can actually integrate. You don't look into the world in a dualistic way. And then we have the Islamic gnosis, spiritual alchemy. Again, the Arabic Hermes was it was acknowledged, and people say it was the Prophet Idris. And there is the Corpus Hermeticum, looking at Zosimus of Panopolis, and how he was influenced, how Zunnun was influenced by him, and how Sufism started. And we have things like Muhyiddin ibn Arabi, and because he actually, unfortunately, Zunnun didn't leave a lot of books or anything. He was more of an oral prophet. He didn't leave much, although there are some books attributed to him, but mainly poetry. He was an interesting guy, and that's Zunnun al-Masri. So Zunnun al-Masri is before Ibn Arabi, and before, of course, what's his name, the Persian, Ibn Arabi and Rumi. They all came after him, and the wisdom of the Sufis. And there is a great revival in the West of the wisdom of the Sufis, particularly Ibn Arabi. Then there have been lots of Hermetic orders and spiritual meditative practices and etc. Starting with the Rosicrucians. I'm not going to go to that, but you can see how big the subject is. And then the Freemasons, and then the Hermetic Brotherhood of Luxor, and then the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, that one of my favorite poet, what's his name, will come to my mind now. It's either being tired or being old. It's not coming to me. Yeah, and then there was what we call theosophy, and then anthroposophy with this guy that's actually behind the anthroposophy. I was just talking about him the other day in Ascona. Rudolf Steiner, yes, Rudolf Steiner. And then after that, there was people who continued by saying there is Egyptian shamanism, and the word shamanism comes from America, the shamans, the traditional healers, and the traditional philosophers, but they use the term to apply to Egypt and ancient Egypt, and there are so many now into Egyptian shamanism, but it's more of a new age, this kind. And then, of course, we have the biogeometry. Combines Pythagorean harmonics, history of architecture, ancient Egyptian temple science, physical radiesthesia, to form a modern physics of quality. Of course, I can't talk more, and the master is here. And then we have the new Hermetic psychology, which is actually started with Jung, the Red Book. Although I personally I find other things that Jung did more illuminating than the Red Book. The Red Book, I think, is a bit childish, and he wasn't mature enough. He did it actually when he was 19 or 20. So, but people revisiting it now and talking about it as the soul in postmodern conditions. But in fact, there are more things like The Undiscovered Self by Jung, which was his last book, is more important. And then there is also James Hillman, who became almost like a continuation of Jung. And all these things give us a promise, or give humanity a promise, the Hermetic promise. That's through philosophy. Why? Because philosophy is thinking. It is not right or wrong. It's not that you go to hell. So through philosophy, they might nurture men's souls and cure sickness of the body with the healing arts. So again, the use of the word healing arts includes so many things. It includes the music, it includes architecture, it includes gardens, it includes plants, it includes everything. So that takes us to how the Hermetica or how the Hermetic philosophy went into cultivating the souls in a big way, and why it's a revival now is a must to save humanity. So, because it is all about self-cultivation. It's about becoming, being and becoming. We said that the scarab is about becoming. And you continue throughout your journey, throughout your lifetime, in a constant becoming. So the concept of self-cultivation, and you can see the beauty of this, sees the act of living as an ongoing work of art. The individual fundamentally becomes the creative master and the artist of himself. So you are the artist of yourself. You sculpt yourself. You make and remake yourself constantly. And this is again the beauty of Osiris, that with every spring he becomes. It is that you have, I mean, I can never overcome this picture of Osiris, and the wheat is coming out of his own body. So it is a civilization, it is a philosophy about becoming. And you have the power of becoming. You are not powerless. So the Hermetic philosophy is about hope, psychology, and pioneering existence. And this is in fact what I am going, or I hope I'm going to do for a series here, if they have me. And I have this as my my Facebook page. At first it was only nude with the sun coming from her mouth, which is the rebirthing of the sun. But I have this quote, which actually it is in one of the books of ancient Egyptian literature, which is about you know, about the dialogue with the soul that I mentioned. It says, "Endure, my soul, assist in the creation of my divine heir." So you know that you can actually leave behind something sacred. You can contribute to the sacredness of society, to the sacredness of humanity. So despite the pain and the agony, you ask your soul to tolerate all the hardships, to put up with all the difficulties, and to assist in your own post-creation or the beyond creation, because you are only a vehicle, you are an instrument towards the gigantic, the bigger creation. And this is my book, The Return of Hermopolis as Healing Memory. The hope for there's a quote from it. "The hope for the future clearly lies deep in the well of the past, and the lesson we learn from the Hermetica is that the art of becoming cannot be achieved unless we start to believe and work towards collective, participatory, integral, and ecological self and the world." Thank you very much.